The widow's silence. The baby was crying again. Jedediah Cole shifted the bundle against his chest, rough hand cradling the tiny head, his thumb brushing at damp curls stuck to the child's brow. The desert wind pushed hard against the porch boards, carrying with it the smell of dust and dry sage. His boots creaked as he rocked back and forth, slow, steady, as though motion alone might soothe the wail. The sky was a bruised red, the sun dropping behind the rim of the far-off mesas. Coyotes yipped in the distance, thin and sharp, and the sound carried across the barbed wire fence like laughter at a funeral. Jed's jaw tightened. Inside, the rocker sat empty. Mary's rocker. It faced the fire, same as it always had, but the quilt she once laid across her lap was folded neat and still. Jed had left it there untouched since the day she was taken. He turned from it now, because looking too long sent a hollow ache gnawing through his ribs. The baby squirmed, cried harder. Jed murmured low, voices cracked as dry creaks. "Easy, little one. Easy now." But his words felt thin against the vastness pressing in on him. A wagon rattled into earshot, iron rims clattering against stones. Jed stilled, shifting the child into the crook of one arm, the other tightening around the shotgun propped against the porch rail. Lantern light bobbed, and soon enough the driver came into view, a stout woman with a wide bonnet tied tight beneath her chin. "Jedediah Cole," she called before the wagon even stopped. "You open that door for me." Jed's brow furrowed. "Evenin', Miss Calhoun. Don't recall sending word I wanted company." "You never do," she answered, clambering down. Her cane thudded against the earth as she approached. "Doesn't mean I don't know when company's needed." He shifted the child higher against his chest and blocked the doorway with his frame. "Ain't no need." Miss Calhoun's eyes flicked to the bundle. The baby had fallen to a whimper, fists tucked under his chin. Her stern face softened a shade, then steeled again. "That child's hungry for more than milk, Jed. Hungry for a mother's hand. You can't stand there and tell me otherwise." Jed's shoulders stiffened. The wind moaned over the roof, tugging at the porch boards. "Ain't looking for another wife." She tilted her chin, eyes narrowing like she was studying a mule too stubborn for its own hide. "Man can fight wolves, Jed Cole. Man can mend fences, brand cattle, break his back against the desert sun. But loneliness? That'll gut a man quicker than lead." Jed looked past her to where shadows stretched long across the yard. The corral fence rattled though no breeze touched it. He squinted, catching sight of half-moon prints pressed into the dirt just beyond the last post. Not from his own stock. Horse tracks. Fresh. "Someone's been riding close," he muttered. Miss Calhoun followed his gaze, but the light was too poor for her eyes. "You're avoiding the truth." He set the baby back in the crook of his arm and took the shotgun in his other hand, stepping down off the porch. The earth gave a dry crunch beneath his boots. He crouched at the prints, brushing his fingers over them. Heavy shod, maybe 4 or 5 horses. He rose, scanning the horizon. Empty, save for the last band of sunlight cutting along the ridge. "Railroad men," he said under his breath. Miss Calhoun's lips pressed tight. Everyone in town had heard the rumors. Ranchers pressed to sell, land stolen by fire or bullet when they refused. Jed's land was wide, water-fed, a prize to any greedy hand. He turned back to the porch, baby fussing again. The tiny face was red, lips working with little gasps. Jed rocked him, slow, eyes still fixed on the dark rim of desert. "You best keep your doors locked," Miss Calhoun said. "And you best stop thinking you can do all this alone. Don't need a wife pushed on me. You need more than your pride," she shot back. Then, softer, "Mary wouldn't want this for you. Or for the babe." The words struck harder than any blow. Jed swallowed, the ground swaying beneath him, though he stood still. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he shifted the child, pressed a kiss to the downy hair, and muttered, "Good evening, Miss Calhoun." Her mouth opened as though to argue further, but something in his eyes stopped her. She tapped her cane once, hard, and turned back toward her wagon. The wheels rattled off into the dark, leaving dust hanging in the air. Jed stood there until the sound faded. The baby's cries had quieted to hiccups. He carried him inside, past the rocker that waited in silence, and laid him in the wooden crib. The quilt Mary had sewn covered the small body, blue squares stitched by hands that would never hold him. Jed lingered, one hand resting on the crib rail. The fire popped. Shadows moved across the walls, and in them he thought he saw Mary's face. He shut his eyes, drew a deep breath, then stepped back. From outside, a horse snorted. Jed froze. His hand closed tight on the shotgun. He moved back to the door, easing it open just enough to look. The yard lay still under a pale moon. The corral fence creaked, but the wind was still. Something shifted in the brush beyond the barn. Jed lifted the shotgun, cocked it, and fired into the night. The blast cracked across the land, echoing against distant ridges. Silence followed, silence thick and waiting. The baby wailed from the crib. Jed turned, jaw clenched, heart hammering. He shut the door, barred it, then crossed back to scoop the child into his arms. "Shoo! Hush now," he murmured, rocking slow, though his eyes stayed on the window where moonlight silvered the yard. Outside, in the shadows beyond the barn, a rider sat silent on his horse, watching the glow of the ranch house. Watching and waiting. The desert carries rumors. The saloon door slammed open with a gust of dust and hot wind. Every card game halted, boots scuffing as men glanced up. A ranch hand stumbled in, hat clutched tight, eyes wide. "They found Eli Barnes," he rasped, "out by the North Ridge. Shot in the back. His cattle scattered." The silence that followed carried more weight than a church bell. One man cursed under his breath. Another spat hard into the spittoon. The barkeep wiped his glass slower than before, as though time itself dragged heavy. At the far table, Miss Calhoun rapped her cane once against the floor. "Eli said no when they offered him $50 an acre," she said, "and now he lies in the dirt." Her eyes swept the room, sharp and cold. "Who among you still believes the railroad men are here for fair dealings?" Murmurs rose, bitter and low. A gambler muttered something about keeping mouths shut, but Miss Calhoun's gaze snapped to him like a hawk's. "Silence won't save your land." From the bar, a laugh rang out. Harsh, confident. Three men leaned there, broad-shouldered, slick vests over sweat-dark shirts. Spurs shined, guns heavy on their hips. One of them, scar traced across his cheek, tipped his whiskey glass toward the crowd. "You talk bold, old woman," he sneered. "But that rancher of yours, Cole, he's just a man with a baby and an empty bed. Won't last long when we come to claim what's owed." Benches scraped. Hands twitched near holsters. But no one drew. The sheriff, seated near the door, pretended to study his boots, saying nothing. Miss Calhoun's lips curled into something like a smile. "You men ever hear the name Jedediah Cole?" Scar Cheek snorted. "A dirt farmer. Widow man with no one to back him." "You think that," she said, voice steady. "But I remember another name for him. Cavalry Cole. Rode with the Union. Rifle never missed. Broke a charge at Chickamauga near single-handed." The room shifted. Chairs creaked as men exchanged uneasy looks. The railroad enforcers laughed, but thinner now. Miss Calhoun tapped her cane again. "You'd best pray he stays quiet on his land. For if he's stirred," she let the words hang, heavy as storm clouds. Outside, the wind howled against the shutters. Underscore. At the ranch, Jed stood the barn door, lantern held high. The horses inside stamped nervously, their eyes rolling white. He tightened the latch and scanned the dark again. Tracks marked the dirt, fresh, circling like wolves testing the herd. He followed them a few paces, shotgun loose in his hand. The baby's cries carried faintly from the house, thin as a reed whistle in the distance. A shadow shifted by the fence. Jed raised the gun, breath steady. "I know you're out there." Silence answered. Then the faint thud of hooves retreating, swallowed by night. Jed lowered the barrel, jaw tight. He turned back toward the glow of the house. With a rocking chair, sat motionless behind the window. underscore underscore. Next morning, Miss Calhoun's wagon rattled up again, but this time she wasn't alone. Beside her sat a woman dressed plain, bonnet low, hands folded in her lap. Jed met them at the gate, expression flat. "I told you I don't need." Miss Calhoun cut him off. "Jed Cole, you need more than you admit. This here is Clara Jameson. She knows loss same as you." The woman lifted her gaze. Her eyes were tired but steady. A faint scar ran along her jawline. She said nothing, only glanced toward the house when the baby cried. Jed stiffened. "I can manage my own." But before he could stop her, Clara stepped past him, light on her feet, and entered the house. Through the doorway, Jed watched her kneel by the crib, hands gentle as she lifted the child. The crying eased almost at once. The sound that followed froze Jed where he stood, a lullaby. Soft, low, the same tune Mary used to hum when the nights ran long. Jed's grip on the shotgun faltered. He closed his eyes, the ache in his chest sharp as spurs digging deep. When he opened them, Clara was still rocking the babe, humming that song as though it had never left the house at all. Miss Calhoun's voice came from the porch behind him. "You can't fight this war alone, Jed, and the war is coming." Jed said nothing. His eyes stayed on Clara, the weight of memory pressing hard. That night, coyotes howled again, but their voices were drowned by the clatter of hooves circling just beyond the lantern light. Jed stepped out with rifle in hand. He fired once into the air. The baby's cry rose behind him, urgent and afraid. The riders pulled back into the dark, but not far. Their laughter carried over the fence, cold and mocking. Jed stood rooted, rifle steady, breath slow. The desert wind tugged at his coat, the silence after the laughter stretching long. From the upstairs window, Clara's face appeared, the baby against her shoulder. She didn't flinch at the gunshot. Her eyes met Jed's across the yard, calm, unwavering. Jed lowered the rifle, but the fire had already kindled in his gaze. The desert carried rumors, but soon enough, it would carry something more. Ashes in the wind. Smoke curled on the horizon, orange and black, blotting out the last of the sun. Jedediah Cole rode hard across the mesa, rifle slung across his back, the baby swaddled against Clara's chest in the wagon. The wind carried the scent of burning wood, the acrid tang of fear, the whistle of bullets through empty air. Ahead, another ranch smoldered. The barn roof had collapsed. Horses fled into the dusk, hooves kicking up clouds of dust. Jed's jaw clenched, knuckles white on the reins. "They'll come here next," Clara said, voice calm but eyes sharp. "And we'll be ready." Jed's hand twitched near his rifle, but he forced it down. "I promised Mary. No more killing. Not for anyone." Clara glanced at him, lips pressed tight. "A vow made to the dead means nothing if the living die. You think I'll let your baby die for a promise?" Jed's ears picked up the faint clatter of hooves in the distance, a patrol of riders circling like vultures. He nodded. "Then it ends tonight." Back at the ranch, the corral gates were nailed shut. Barrels of kerosene lined the barn walls. The baby fussed inside, crib tucked beneath a low beam. Jed checked the old lock on the front door, then opened the hatch leading to the cellar, revealing a hidden cache, his cavalry rifle, revolver, and saber. Dust thick as smoke coated each. His hands trembled as he lifted the rifle. Memories flashed, Chickamauga, thunder of charges, smoke and fire, and the screams of men he'd sworn to protect. He set the rifle aside. The saber was too heavy. He picked the revolver, checking the cylinder, fingers steady now, heart hammering in time with the wind. Clara emerged from the shadows, rifle in hand. "I know how to use it," she said. Her jawline bore a faint scar, wrist steady, eyes focused. "Don't think I haven't been waiting for this." The first rider appeared over the ridge, silhouette black against the burning horizon. Jed leveled his gun. Clara followed, crouched behind the porch rail. The baby's cries were faint through the shutters. The rider spurred forward, laughing, confident. His horse kicked dust in Jed's face. The gun barked. The man dropped, horse stumbling, flailing in the dirt. Two more came at once. Jed fired again, fast, precise. Clara's rifle cracked in tandem, a flash of silver under the low sun. One man toppled over the fence. The other screamed, horse bolting, and disappeared into the dust. The town watched from the ridge, silhouettes trembling, voices caught in throats. Miss Calhoun, cane in hand, whispered to herself, told him he needed a wife. And she came. Another rider pushed forward, torch in hand, sparks flying, intent on the house. Clara's shot rang out clean. The torch went spinning into the dirt, flames hissing against the dry ground. The man fell, eyes wide in shock. Jed breathed hard, firing another round at a rider attempting to flank from the corral side. Dust rose thick and red, powder smoke mingling with the smell of charred wood. His movements were precise, the rifle an extension of his own arm, muscle memory from wars fought long ago. He crouched behind a barrel, saw the glint of another pistol aimed at the door. Clara had moved to intercept, body low, finger steady. Her shot struck true, dropping the gun with a clatter. The horizon burned bright as more riders hesitated. Their confidence thinned. The whispers from the town reached them, carried by wind. That's Jed Cole, Cavalry Cole. Jed felt the weight of the revolver, felt the blood in his veins, the anger, the loss, the vow to protect what remained of Mary's life. He rose, hands steady, and stepped into the open. A man lunged from the shadow of the barn, blade in hand. Jed sidestepped, swinging the revolver in a wide arc. The man hit the ground, groaning, disarmed, defeated. Clara moved to the window, hands steady on her rifle, eyes scanning the ridge. Another rider tried to circle, but her shot rang out. Another fall, another man removed from the fight. Dust, sweat, and smoke mingled thick around them. The baby wailed once, then quieted as Clara hummed, soft, low, the lullaby Mary had sung. Jed's chest tightened. He realized in that moment. The woman beside him, steady and unflinching, had become more than a companion. She had become a shield, a partner, a mother to the child he could not raise alone. The last man, a captain of sorts, spurred forward, torch lifted high, fury in his eyes. Jed waited, gun low but ready. When a man reached the barn door, Jed fired, knocking him from the saddle. He hit the ground, dust and sparks in his hair, groaning, beaten but alive. Jed stepped toward him, revolver trained. "Leave," he said, voice low, steady. "And tell your men that Jed Cole stands on his land. Any man foolish enough to return." He let the sentence hang, the weight of his stare enough. The man scrambled up, terror in his eyes, and rode off into the fading light. The remaining riders scattered, retreating into the horizon. The desert lay silent again, smoke curling from the distant burn barns. Jed lowered his gun. Clara stepped to his side, still holding the rifle, and glanced at the house. The baby slept peacefully now, quilt snug around him. Miss Calhoun's voice came faintly over the ridge, told him he needed a wife, and she stood by him, stronger than any man could hope. Jed exhaled, shoulders sagging, exhaustion pulling at every muscle. He lowered the revolver, placing a hand on Clara's shoulder. No words were needed. The sun rose, painting the desert gold. The air smelled of ash and earth, of victory and fear. And in that moment, Jed Cole understood he was not alone. Not anymore. The legend was only beginning. The widow's rifle. Dawn split the horizon, pale and sharp. Dust swirled across the yard, catching the first light in red-gold streaks. 15 riders crested the ridge, leather boots tight in stirrups, spurs clinking like faint alarms. Their guns gleamed, ready, confidence brimming. They imagined Jed Cole alone, tired, a man too worn to fight. Jed stood on the porch, revolver steady in one hand, the other resting on the cradle of the crib where the baby slept under a quilt Mary had sewn. Clara knelt beside him, rifle ready, eyes hard as flint. The first rider kicked dust, a shadow among shadows, torch in hand. Jed fired. The report shattered the morning quiet. The horse stumbled. The rider toppled into the dirt. Another followed, gun raised. Clara's rifle barked, echoing across the valley. The man fell, rolling over the fence, dust rising like smoke from a funeral pyre. From a ridge, the townsfolk watched, frozen. Miss Calhoun, leaning on her cane, whispered to herself, told him he needed a wife, and she came. The riders hesitated, unsure now. Jed's hands were steady, movement smooth, rifle snapping into aim and fire with the precision of a man trained in war, tempered by years of loss. Clara matched him shot for shot, body low, eyes scanning every ridge and fence line. A torch struck the porch, flames licking wood. Clara fired, a clean shot, knocking the torch from the man's hand. Sparks hissed as they hit the dry boards. One rider, larger than the rest, spurred forward, blade in hand. Jed waited, breathing slow, then sidestepped the lunge. The man's weight carried him past, and Jed's revolver clanged against his belt, knocking him down. Dust rose. Blood mixed with sweat on the man's cheek as he scrambled back, defeated but alive. The rest of the gang scattered, confusion breaking their ranks. Jed advanced, revolver raised, eyes cold. Clara followed, rifle steady, whispering lullabies to the baby in memory of Mary, calming the small life that tied them all to the land. From the corral, one last rider broke cover, desperate, gun raised toward the house. Jed fired first. The horse reared, throwing him to the dirt. Clara's second shot rang out, striking the man square in the shoulder. He yelped and stumbled, arms flailing, before retreating into the morning haze. Silence returned. The wind tugged at the porch boards, dust settling like snow on scorched earth. Jed lowered the revolver, voice quiet but firm. Leave, and tell you, man, Jed Cole stands on his land. Any man foolish enough to return. His gaze swept the horizon, hand brushing Clara's shoulder, words unnecessary, threat and promise contained in the steady hold of his eyes. The riders fled, their dust columns shrinking as they vanished toward the ridges. The town remained on the horizon, silent, watching. Miss Calhoun straightened, cane tapping the ground, whispering. The woman he needed, she stood by him, stronger than any man could hope. Jed exhaled, shoulders heavy. He glanced at Clara, hand still on the rifle. Her eyes softened, catching his in quiet understanding. The baby cooed from the crib inside. Jed stepped toward the porch, then the door, then paused. Clara turned, lifting the child gently into her arms. The small body wriggled, eyes opening, curious. She hummed the same lullaby Mary had once sung, soft and low, the words carrying across the dust and ash of the valley. Jed watched, a lump rising in his throat, realization settling in like sunlight through smoke. They were not just survivors. They were family. Not by chance, not by fate alone, but by strength, courage, and the ties of grief transformed into defiance. The town exhaled. Doors opened slowly, men and women peering out, faces pale, awestruck. The sheriff leaned on his hat, silent, knowing he had witnessed a legend unfold. Jed looked around at the house, the scorched barns in the distance, the smoke curling into the morning sky. He saw Clara, holding the baby close, her rifle lowered but ready, and understood fully the truth of Miss Calhoun's words. Some fights required a partner, a shield, a heart steady as steel beside yours. He lowered his revolver, feeling the tension leave his arms. Clara's eyes met his again, steady, unwavering. He nodded once. That was enough. The sun rose higher, burning away the last traces of smoke and dust. The wind carried away the rumors of cowardice, of weakness. Only the story remained, whispered in the streets, told around hearths, destined to grow into legend. On the edge of the desert, a widowed rancher faced an empire with nothing but grit, a rifle, and a widow's song. And from that day forward, no one spoke of Jedediah Cole without mentioning Clara, his equal, his shield, and the woman who saved the West. Jed stepped inside, letting Clara hold the baby close. He let his hands rest on the quilt Mary had sewn, feeling both loss and hope. Outside, the desert stretched wide and endless, sun-soaked and golden, witness to a victory earned through courage, love, and the unbreakable will of two souls bound by fate. The wind carried a whisper through the valley, soft, persistent. The legend had begun.